Hi, this is Dr. Tom Rogers at Performance Medicine. On today's podcast, we're going to bring a special guest on, Derek Harden, who is not only a good friend, but he's my pastor at Christ Fellowship Church here in Kingsport. Derek is an interesting guy. He's really an engineer turned minister. He played football at the University of Ohio, like he calls it. And he's just a great guy, very wise, and I wanted you to hear me talk with him today about fear and anxiety, something that in our world we're having just a ton of right now, and he brings us some wisdom and insight as to how to deal with it and really where some of the root causes of fear and anxiety reside. So I hope you'll enjoy listening to this podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, first off, just want to tell you, man, how honored I am to be here today, and I love how you're doing this, how you're educating not only your people, but actually beyond that, actually in this. And so your family's beautiful, and I love how you guys love the community so well, and specifically how you guys practice medicine. My wife and I have been learning a ton about how it's never just the physical. It's always tied to it, whether it's a mental, a physical, a spiritual, it's a belief system, whatever. There's so much more. And the way that you guys practice medicine gets me encouraged and excited. And so, yeah, last week specifically, I was preaching on unity, actually, which I think we all can agree that there's so much division. There's so much separation, every part of that. And a big part of division and separation, I believe, is rooted in fear. Fear, as you know, and you could speak on this probably a lot, but fear, our response mechanism is that we fight or we flight, right? That's what we learned in school, fight or flight. And when we fight, what are we doing? We're literally fighting, whatever that is, and we're separating. And when we run away, we're separating. And so, like you're a doctor, in my profession, what I get to do, I see the best of people and I see the worst of people every day. You know, I get to hear the greatest stories, and I get to invite it into these intimate, sacred moments. And then I also get to sit in my office and have somebody come in, and you literally hear the worst of the worst stories, similar to you. And so in this season, yeah, we've been navigating a lot. In our area where we live in the country, it's very polarized as far as politics. It's polarized, and how do we respond to COVID? It's polarized, and you name it. And because of that, I see that in our congregation. I see people that are scared to death to come out. Some people still have not literally gone out and done anything besides get groceries. And then you got people that are saying, well, you know, I've never even worn a mask. You know, I'm going out and I haven't slowed down. And so we see both ends of that. But where I think the division happens is when we allow fear to have a stronghold. And where I think that fear is most exasperated is when we live in isolation. And so I do agree with you. I think this season in history, we're seeing the effects of fear like we've maybe never seen before. But I actually think fear has been there all along. I don't think there's ever been a time in history where there was not a country or people that did not have to navigate fear. It's just in this season, I think it's come to the surface in a way that maybe we haven't seen before. And a lot of that is because of the good intention, and rightfully so, we've isolated some. But that isolation is a really scary place, because in isolation, we get inside our mind a lot. We go down here. And when we don't have anybody like community to balance those thoughts, balance that one, we go in some really bad places. And out of that place comes hatred, comes slander, comes just separation in our words and our actions. And so, yeah, we can talk about fear some more if you want to give some direction, or if you want to speak anything, we can go for it.
See, I told you he was big time. I liked the way you put that. You're exactly right. And, you know, what I've found is that when I listen to the news or read the papers, even locally, I mean, they're promoting fear. And I know as a physician that fear is its own worst enemy. I mean, the only thing to fear is fear itself. Who said that? Franklin, FDR, or somebody? Yeah. But it's true. It promotes anxiety and isolation, and people need each other, relationships. When it boils down to the end of your life, you're not going to say, well, I made all this money, I drove these cars, I had these fancy houses. You're going to base your whole life on your relationships, really, and your faith. And so I think there's really too much anxiety and fear going on right now about all this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, my practice and my nature is to try to calm people down and say, hey, this is going to be fine. We're going to work through this. We're going to take care of it. That's why I'm doing a lot of telemedicine right now. Speaking of COVID, I've treated a lot of COVID over the phone, hundreds of cases, and I'm not scared of it. You know, I think it's a contagious virus. You know, it's certainly, is it overhyped or underhyped? I'm not going to really say either one because it's so political. People are getting so angry on each side of the fence. But I'll tell you, my average patient is really not, you know, that scared about it. I mean, they have some common sense. I try to use common sense.
That's good, man.
And
I'm a simple guy too.
you know, I like to interact with the patient, and I will tell you that some of the, you know, if you look at the news and listen to some of our leaders in healthcare, who probably haven't seen a patient in 40 years, you know, sometimes I think they're promoting a little bit more anxiety than needs to be. Not that this isn't a bad thing. It's very contagious, and but the fact is, your average patient is just going to be just fine with this thing. I mean, I've had family members that have had it, and seen its course. I've seen many people through this thing, and the first thing I will tell you, don't fear it, because when you have a lot of anxiety in your life, your immune system goes down, and your immune system is what you have to fight a virus with. So, you know, I get pretty aggressive with treating this virus, you know, with certain things that I know work. But the important point is to keep yourself healthy, and so you can fight any virus off and get through it just fine. So I see depression coming about as a result of this, and I see some long-term situations coming down the pike from this if we can't kind of turn our attitudes around about it. What are your feelings about depression and what you're seeing in people? You see the best, you see the worst. It'd be hard to be a minister, I think, in your situation. I think it's the hardest occupation there is. Much harder than engineering, probably. Have you found that to be true?
Yes, for
Engineering is
sure.
black and white, and this
Machines
is not.
don't talk back. Machines don't lie. Machines know what they are, right? And you can figure it out usually. But people, we're complicated, man. And then you throw the spiritual aspect in there. Yeah, it's very interesting. So I just want to be clear, and just so everybody, fear is very powerful. Can we just agree with that?
Oh, sure.
Fear is extremely powerful. And here's where, as I look at history, where I think specifically we see this. And so when you talk about politics, which we're literally in the middle of some chaos right now in politics, and then you think about religion. So both politics and religion have largely been driven by one thing, and that's fear. Religion for years was about a group of people, a person being in control, and usually that control was brought about by putting fear in other people. That if this happened, if they don't do this, if they do this, and so there was a manipulation that would happen. Well, I don't think we have to think too far about our current election climate. Both political parties, they recognize the power of fear. They recognize it, and they wield it like nobody's business. Both sides. So that's not a political statement. Both sides.
Both sides.
You fear this. If our side doesn't win, the world is over. Both sides have pretty much said that. Yeah. And what is that? That's a power play with fear, right? And so I think it's okay for us to say, hey, we are in a fearful climate right now. And first we have to acknowledge that if we're going to begin to navigate that. And so, yeah, man, you watch Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, any of these, there's so much driven from fear because it gets people pulled in, it ties you in, and then it holds you there. And so it's a moneymaker, right? And then you throw COVID in the midst of that, real fear. And so, oh my goodness, what do we do? What do we do with fear? Well, the scriptures that I spend a lot of time studying say a lot of things about fear.
Isn't that the most commonly used word in the Bible is fear?
Well, I don't know about the single word, but the phrase, do not fear, do not be afraid, or do not be dismayed, that kind of phrase, I think it's around 365. Some people say, well, there's one do not be afraid for every day of the year. That's what some people would say. I don't know if that's exactly true, but it's close. There's a lot. But do not be afraid. And so here's what the scripture, I think, helps us understand. That I think there's three primary negative emotions that we all deal with: fear, shame, and guilt. Now, religion would say suppress those and act like they're not there and kind of move on. That's what religion would tell you. But actually, I think actually all three of them were given to God to us by God for a reason, right? And so I think of it like our car. Sometimes something's going wrong in our car, and we see that what we call an idiot light, or a little light that comes on, check engine light that comes on. I actually believe that fear, guilt, and shame are like our check engine lights. That when we have fear, it's actually God designed us to say, okay, something's going on in here. I need to, there's something I'm believing, there's something I'm leaning into that's not right. And so when I feel ashamed, when I feel guilty, when I feel fear, it's actually an invitation from God to actually seek truth. It's a different approach, right? We just want to try to act like it's not there. We just want to get rid of it. But it's actually, I think, an invitation to go deeper. And then what we see Jesus say is, whatever you believe about Jesus, I don't think any of us would say that his teachings are elementary. I mean, dude's got a PhD. If you believe he's the king, if you believe he's the Messiah, whatever. But his teachings are profound. He baffled those in his day when he was walking around. And one of the things that he said is that truth sets you free. Truth sets you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I actually believe that most of our fear is in things that actually aren't true. And so the teaching of Jesus is actually, if we can recognize that and we can say, okay, I'm scared, I'm fearful, what am I fearful of? And then go down deeper to say, what is the root of that? I think we then have a place to actually get to what is true. And in that, receiving or aligning with that truth, we can actually be set free from the fear that we have. That's Jesus' teaching. And so for us, we try to help people do that. So if I catch myself being fearful, I'll ask the Lord, man, let me just take a second. Okay, God, what am I actually afraid of? And then as a believer, as a follower of Jesus, I think what he came to do was obviously change the world, I believe. And what did Jesus do? We could talk a lot about what he did, but when he died on the cross, he did two things. He overcame sin and death. That's what we believe. He overcame sin and death. And in that, what's interesting is really those are the two core fears that we have. Separation on this earth. That's what we think sin. People say sin is separation from the Lord. And so he said, I'm going to take care of your sin problem, the separation, your fear of being alone on the earth. I'm going to take care of that. And death. And you talk to a lot of people, and honestly, COVID right now, people are scared of dying. Wow. There's a lot of followers of Jesus that are scared of dying. And what Jesus actually did on the cross is he went first. He said, listen, you don't have to fear death. I'm going to show you can die, and that death is actually going to lead to resurrection. And so as a follower of Jesus, what I think he did that was so incredible is he showed us that there is no separation now in Christ on this earth or in the future earth or in the new heaven, the new earth. And so what he did, I think, is he actually undermined fear, which is what I think the enemy uses to separate us. He said, listen, no, actually, I'm going to go first. I'm going to show you. Me and the Father were never separated, now on this earth, but all for eternity. And so as a follower of Jesus, I look at that and say, man, when I'm being fearful, a lot of times it's because I feel alone. It's because I feel like nobody else understands. It's because I don't see anybody else around me that sees me, that knows me, that understands me. And in that, all those things that say, do not fear, most of them come with a condition. And it's just like what the psalmist said, David said in Psalm 23. He said, I do not fear, for you are with me. And that's the promise of Jesus. He said, listen, I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to forsake you. I'm with you. And so as a follower of Jesus, a lot of my fear is subsided or is taken away when I recognize that in every situation, whether it's school, whether it's my workplace, in my home, whether I'm dealing with an illness, whether I'm on the doorstep of death, that I'm not alone. That actually God is with me, and he's promised to never leave me. And in that, I actually feel, and I've experienced my own life, and a lot of people have, that undermines the depth of fear that we have. right? So that's fear. So a piece of fear. We could talk for days about this, by the way. This is going to be a little
awesome.
snapshot.
This is well said. So do you think fear is really a lack of faith in
Well,
a way, or
that's
doubting your own faith?
I don't know if it's a lack of faith. I think it's misdirected faith. So there's songs that say, and you look this up, "Fear is a liar," which is a really catchy song, by the way. Mm-hmm. And a lot of believers say, "Fear is a liar." I actually don't think fear is a liar. I actually think fear actually tells us what we're truly believing. And so if I have fear, it's not that it's not true. It's actually that I've placed faith in something that's inferior. Mm-hmm. Big difference, right? And so if I'm scared for my health, or I'm scared that, I'm never going to get married, or all, I've taken that thing and I've placed it as the supreme place in my life. I've given it the priority, the supremacy in my life. And I've placed my hope in that thing. And if that thing lets me down, then my life's going to be over. But as a follower of Jesus, the main thing has to be the main thing. The first thing has to be the first thing, right? And so I actually think it's actually, when we have fear, it's giving us insight into what we're actually believing, which is very different than how we usually fear.
I love the way you approach that. As a doctor facing illnesses and things every day, somehow in my practice, I just know what to do. Maybe call it experience or call it God-given, I don't know. And it doesn't come from me. A lot of times people give me the credit. Thank you so much. You really saved my life. You helped me through this. I don't really take any of the credit myself for it at all. I mean, it's just something I know it's more divinely given. So I approach it that way. But you're right. This is a rough time for people, but I would just encourage people not to be so fearful of this thing. We live in a good place. For most of us, we're healthy. We have the ability to heal ourselves, but certainly a part of healing is interactions and relationships, and just taking care of yourself, basically getting out, exercising, getting a good night's sleep, take your vitamins, eat right, develop good relationships, because a soured relationship, a lot of times when I see a patient and they're just all terrible, their health is going downhill, they're either gaining weight or losing too much weight or wanting medications, and you start talking to them, and almost every time it's some relationship problem, and bitterness, but I see that all the time in my practice. But this has been a great little talk you've given us. He is big time. So I think we realize that. But let's do this again. If we can kind of update
I love
people, because the medical and the pastoral, I think, are equally important. Well, yours is a lot more important. Let's put it that way.
I think it goes hand in hand. Yeah, I think it goes. Let me tell you one last thing about fear, and this is why I think it's so important. And you know this, and you could actually speak into the piece of this. But what fear does is it paralyzes us. So just think about this. Fear keeps us from moving forward. I believe that God actually has designed us to continue to ascend, to move forward. Fear stops us. So it's at work, whatnot. And fear, when we slip into fear, what do? We only think in what is that? Is that the reptilian part of your brain?
Yeah.
So when we're in fear, we actually resort to the lowest level of thinking possible. So just think about this. So if you're in a job, most of us, we need creativity. Even you're practicing medicine, which I love the fact that you don't know medicine, you're practicing medicine, you're learning.
It's an art as well as a science.
And so fear, just think about how much it robs us of. It actually robs us of actually thinking thoughts that are beyond where we currently are. It actually keeps us from progressing and learning and loving people well. And so fear, oh my goodness. So just think about that. So what is it costing you? And then even today, this is what we ask all the time is God, what do you want me to know about this? So if you're listening today, you're a follower of Jesus, I believe he speaks. And so if you find yourself in a fearful position, I think the biggest thing we can do as followers of Jesus is to recognize that we're not alone, that God is with us. And so part of that is saying, God, where are you and what are you doing? What do I need to know? And I've believed that when we recognize, like David, that we're not alone, that we can actually walk through the valley of the shadow of death and fear no evil, for you are with me. That same God is the God of today. And so what does that look like for us to recognize and become more aware of God? And then to do some of the practical things like be in community. Find somebody that you can connect with. Eat right. Do those things. And I think, and at the end of the day, that this season is going to lead to breakthrough for some people, that it's going to lead to innovation because we're being forced to think differently. We're thinking differently about medicine, about church, about businesses. And so if we allow ourselves to actually get through the fear and get our eyes up and to look at the opportunities around us, I think we're actually going to come out better. Some people won't. That's a choice we have. But I'm actually really excited, man, and really optimistic about the future of those that will actually look for what is available and not just get our head down and look at what's not.
I agree with you. This is a time of change for sure. It's going to change the way we think about a lot of things, not only with medicine but with industry and everything. So it's a watershed period in our lives for sure. We'll never forget 2020. And I think I agree with you. I think it can be a good thing in the end because if nothing else, from a medical aspect, I'm telling you, the people that have problems with the virus are the people that have not taken care of their health. I mean, the morbidly obese, low vitamin D, heart disease, people that really have let themselves go and their immune system's terrible. So I think people realize, hey, I need to lose weight. I need to start exercising, eating right. Then I'll have nothing to fear from my body can fight this thing off. But that's just from a medical aspect.
Yeah,
but
I like it.
There's a whole nother game when you're talking about our spiritual lives, which is certainly the number one thing we need to think about on this earth, but in my opinion. But this has been great. Let's have you back. And, certainly Derek Harden at Christ Fellowship Church is a wonderful guy. It's great to know you. And let's go work out and pump some iron.
Pump some iron, man. I like it, man. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Good. You're awesome, man. You did good, man. You flip into that mode quick, don't you? Boom.